Welcome to another episode of No Power Panel. I'm Noam.
And I'm Isaac.
I'm Noam with a shaved head. Okay. Thought I'd mention that off the
new
gate
look.
for new look. Summer look. Okay. So we have some interesting stories to talk about. Nothing maybe as dramatic as we've started off with off the top the last couple of times. But I think we're going to start off by talking about the new defense spending pledge that Mark Carney has made, and that is a part of the NATO and negotiations with the states. Then we'll talk about some Alberta provincial politics. Go figure. And then we'll talk about the New York City mayoral primary election that happened this week, and then go into our winners and losers of the week. So, to kind of start off with the defense spending, the highlight, the headline, is that Mark Carney has committed to Canada's biggest defense spending increase since the Second World War. He's pledged to double the national defense budget by, I believe it's 2035, and that is front loaded. So a majority of that funding happens pretty quickly, and then some of it ramps up over the next number of years, is how it's being structured.
Mm-hmm. And it's annual targets, so every year it's not like it's just like has to be a part of the budget now going forward. Well, if they follow through on their commitment, they could always not follow through on commitments like they've done in the past when they had the 2% target for NATO. So who knows? But it's definitely a change of pace for Canada in terms of spending.
Where do you stand on the 2% NATO commitment? And then countries, on one hand, my take is that, like, okay, if we're going to be a part of a military alliance like that, it makes sense that there is a standard that you have to keep up to so that you're whatever. I'm not sure it should be 2%, but that's an argument for another day. My judgment largely comes from now most of the countries in NATO going beyond 2%. And that being kind of an active choice that they're making to fund militaries beyond what their commitment actually is. What's your thinking on the military budget, Isaac?
Yeah. Well, one, like I I feel I'm
Like, I
at
know we're
odds
both
because
pacifists.
yeah,
And we
I'm like
both
you should like the number one thing you should cut from the budget is defense spending. But then at the same time, it does leave you vulnerable to situations that can come up with like what's happened with the states recently in terms of how it's like we can keep our defense spending low, and we have been able to historically, we being Canada, because it is true that America kind of has like picked up defense slack for Canada, but also you don't have to be posturing on a world stage in terms of, I think a lot of defense spending is unnecessary. And I think hitting targets for the sake of hitting targets in terms of spending, like, it's not gonna like change the impact of your, ability to like be a sovereign nation. Like once you get past a certain point, like I think a lot of it is like posturing. I don't know how much has material consequences either way, so it's hard to tell.
I mean, most militaries fail their audits is the other thing, right? Like, so much of defense spending is just going to contractors and not being actually truly invested in the ways that it needs to be invested. I
Mhm.
liked that a piece of this was raising the salaries for soldiers and for the people in the armed forces. I think that is where some of that should be coming from.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure that we need to be spending huge amounts of money on weapons that never actually get used, on maintaining bases in parts of the world that there's no reason there needs to be a military presence in. Um, I I personally, I think that yeah, I agree with you. I think that there needs to be a readjustment, not just in terms of cutting the military budget, but figuring out whether it is actually being spent effectively. Because, like you said, I have no problem with a military so far as being able to maintain sovereignty, and I think that peacekeeping is a very important role that Canada has traditionally played with our armed forces. That has value and that brings things to the international community. I think that those things we might want to look at increasing our funding of and shift away from just raw war funding that
Mhm.
happens both in Canada and internationally.
Yeah, I it's hard for me to come up with a concrete stance on it because I don't know like the breakdown of like what that spending would actually
Mhm.
look like. But just like as a rule, I think like governments that spend too much on defense as a portion of GDP, and this is a large shift, from past spending. So it's like that spending has to come from somewhere. What's it gonna come at the expense of? You know, um, will it be at the expense of uh, services? Will it be at expense of funding for, will there be austerity measures? Will like it's this liberal government's gonna have to like they're riding a fine line because they're saying they're not gonna, raise revenue sources like taxes or anything of the sort, but they're announcing all this new spending. So I'm not sure what that's
And they've
gonna look.
also promised to balance the budget.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like that becomes questionable. I think that we used to hear a lot about magic money trees. And it was a phrase that I know was weaponized a lot, particularly against Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, I think that Mark Carney might want to think about where his magic money tree comes from. Uh, because you're right, he's making a lot of promises. He's not promising to do things like put a wealth tax in that would raise revenue, like capital gains taxes
Yeah,
that would raise
they're
revenue.
going against all these revenue tools that the Trudeau
Yeah.
government was proposing.
And that we're going to effectively raise revenue, and nobody was talking about leaving. Nobody was like, these were not concerns that was realistically happening. Mark Carney has a much more conservative economic view, and I think genuinely believes that a part of it is just generating growth without defining what that actually means.
Mhm.
Um, which is unfortunate because that never seems to happen the way that austerity financial politicians think that it's going to. Um, and but like I find it interesting that during the campaign he touted the experience he touted at to be able to be the prime minister was his Bank of Canada and Bank of England governorships. And during both of those, he was appointed by conservative prime ministers pursuing austerity politics,
Mhm.
austerity finances. So, like, his record is as being somebody who those kinds of politicians seek out to be helpful. And the progressive left in Canada, I think, has a real reckoning on the way once they realize what a lot of people who call themselves on the progressive left and identify as being on the progressive left voted for, having been this kind of austerity. And that's going to be something that I hope that what we don't see down the road is purity testing. I hope that what we don't see down the road is if you back this in 2025, then you can't be a part of the left movement in 2026, 2027, 2028, whenever the next election comes around. And that is what we have seen play out elsewhere when this kind of thing happens. And I think that we really need to be open-armed and just go, if austerity politics and austerity finances is hurting you, it doesn't matter who you have supported in the past. There is a home for you with progressives who don't believe in austerity and believe in government being a force for good and government actually serving people. And that is something that these kinds of spending announcements on these kinds of things make me nervous about.
Yeah. And you can only imagine that it's coming, right? Like, I feel like the austerity has to be coming because there's no other real, like, answer. I feel like he's not
Unless they're
signaling
just
that.
going to break their balanced budget promise.
Yeah, which is fine. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. No, I like do it. Right? It's not, it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Money is a construct. Okay. Let's move on to Alberta.
You can just hand wave at any struggle by just saying, it's all made up. Who cares?
It's all made up anyway.
The debater guys on the right wouldn't like that.
That could see some fun reception. Okay. Moving on. That's a conversation for another day. Alberta had 3 by-elections this week, Isaac.
Yeah.
You want to tell us what happened?
Yeah, sure. So there were 3 by-elections, one in Edmonton Ellerslie, one in Edmonton Strathcona, and one in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. I like that name. I never heard of it before. It's not a.
I kind of like the idea of the speaker going the member for Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills and having to say that 3 times fast.
And I'm fairly confident Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills is not a federal election riding. I know it's not.
No, I just looked into it.
Yeah, so I had never heard it before, but
I believe actually parts of it are in Battle River Crowfoot.
Yeah. It's one of the most conservative ridings in Alberta. So, and the Edmonton ridings, Edmonton Strathcona, one of the most largest NDP strongholds in
the country.
In the country,
we can definitively say at this point,
even federally. So we can say it's one of the seven most. The boundaries are slightly different, but it is essentially the same riding. It's one of the 7 most NDP ridings in the
home to Heather McPherson, who went first in our NDP leadership draft.
Yes, and it was also Rachel Notley's seat. So when she resigned, that opened up the by-election. Now we know Naheed Nenshi was the mayor of Calgary. There was some chatter about would that turn off the Edmonton NDP stronghold, which does exist at the provincial level right now in Alberta, and it has since Notley's first election, 2015. So the It doesn't seem to have done that. He actually increased the vote share there. He got 82.2% or 82.3%, while Notley got 79.
Essentially matching what Notley did in their sweep in 2015.
So any concern about, Nenshi not translating in Edmonton is probably unfounded. I think that from what it looks like to me, they also won Edmonton, Ellerslie, fairly
Which is
handily.
the one, to be clear, Naheed Nenshi ran in Edmonton Strathcona because there was not a snowball's chance in hell that a new Democrat, particularly the leader, was going to lose Edmonton Strathcona.
Yeah.
Edmonton Ellerslie, there was some talk. The Conservatives, because the Conservatives didn't need to campaign in Edmonton Strathcona, they invested all of their resources into Ellerslie. They really fought for it. And I believe the NDP candidate there also increased the vote share.
Yeah, so it was kind of going into these 3 by-elections. It was like Olds-Didsbury was kind of handily going to be conservative. Edmonton Strathcona was handily going to be NDP. And they did hold Edmonton Ellerslie, the NDP, but the UCP, if the NDP was weak as they might want them to be, the UCP might want them to be, they did maybe want to try to pick that up. They did not, and it wasn't particularly close either. It was about like 12 or 14%, I think, somewhere around in the teens, in terms of the percentage win. So it's not it's hard to actually pick up any meaningful information from by-elections, but it's not a bad first test for Nenshi's leadership. And it shows that it sets the NDP up to at least say, okay, we can maintain these strongholds of Edmonton and Calgary. Let's work on those inroads, more into the more exurban regions, in those like donuts of Edmonton and Calgary that they need, that Notley won when she formed government, that they just need to push farther out essentially from those. And I think these results say that there's a chance. Danielle Smith, I think, is going to have to walk a fine line, walking into the next election, because which I wanted to bring up the next point is she's gonna
I just want to say
maintain her support. Sorry, do you want to jump in or
no? Go ahead.
She needs to maintain her support, but she also is at risk of losing some support in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. I
have the results
Republican
right here.
Party,
I'll pull it up.
The Alberta Republican Party got 18%. Now, this is a brand new party. They rebranded from the Buffalo Party of Alberta. The Buffalo Party, when they were formed on the idea of Alberta exit, or an independent Alberta. Then now with this rebranding to the Alberta Republican Party, they've added on a new promise. So their promise was they supported a referendum to leave Canada. Now they're saying they would support a binding referendum to leave Canada, and then a non-binding referendum to state support to be the 51st state of America. So, and that's 18%. In a riding like this, it doesn't matter. In close ridings, that hurts the UCP. We have to remember the UCP was formed because as a merger, because of the vote split on the right that led to that NDP government, Rachel Notley's NDP government. It was the UCP was a merger between the Wild Rose and the PCs in Alberta. So the fact that there's now these other parties popping up on the right should be scary to Danielle Smith. It's scary that they exist in the first place. So what's your take on it? I don't know how much we want to get in.
So my take particularly on this point is a fewfold. I think that first of all, I agree with you. Like, it's scary that these people exist. It's scary that they are called the Republican Party. They identify as Canadian MAGA people. And it's scary that they got that kind of result in a provincial by-election. I think that, like we mentioned, it's hard to judge based on by-elections whether this is a kind of one election protest vote while this movement is really starting to pick up steam, or whether this is something that once the referendum is over next year, when the next provincial election happens the following year, or the year after that, I can't remember when their next one is exactly, but a couple of years down the road, does this kind of party still have that kind of steam behind it to damage the UCP? Yeah. It's possible. I think that the UCP, this is the thing about conservative politics in Canada, and it's something that we've witnessed now over the last, number of generations almost, where conservative politics are a coalition amongst a huge number of different ideological groups that all kind of roughly agree on enough to say that they're in the same party. But within those groups, there is a huge diversity of thought. And we saw it when the Reform Party emerged, and when it then turned into Canadian Alliance, and then with the merger into the Conservative Party of Canada with the Progressive Conservatives, and with kind of Stephen Harper being the only person, we talked about it during the election, Stephen Harper being the only person who has been able to successfully hold together all of those groups to be able to win government as a Conservative since 1988. And it's something that was a skill that he had because he came from a number of those different groups. He was an economist, kind of, who was able to speak to fiscal conservatives and neocons on financial issues. He was a Christian heritage guy who believed in traditional family values and was able to speak to that audience. He was a Alberta person who was able to have that particular Alberta appeal to him. And so he was able to put all of those forces together to keep that coalition together. It's something that we haven't seen other conservative leaders be able to do at the federal level. It's something we have seen conservative leaders fail to do at the provincial level, particularly in Alberta. Jason Kenney did not lose an election. Jason Kenney was ousted by his own caucus because he was siding more with one part of the caucus than the other. And they got enough votes together to be able to kick him out. This is not something that stopped at the water's edge when Danielle Smith took over. She is right now trying to navigate exactly how to deal with these waters to be able to figure out how to keep her coalition united in the United Conservative Party while also trying to not do irreparable damage to the province that she governs. And I genuinely believe, based on what she's done and what she's said, that the provincial aspect of that is her lesser priority. Her greater priority is to keep the movement together, and she's willing to make sacrifices to do that. So my big concern is what she looks at this result in Olds-Didsbury and sees happening there. Because if what she sees when she looks at that is something that she needs to head off even more to an extreme, that she hasn't gone far enough, and that's what those results are telling her, Do we see her call the referendum herself? Do we
Yeah.
see her stay neutral in the referendum? Right? Like, those are the questions that I think start coming up. And I think that it's very fortunate that the Edmonton results were what they are. And I think that Naheed Nenshi winning his seat in the legislature is going to be key for what happens next.
Yeah, and I think it should scare Polyev too. As you said, it's hard to keep this coalition together, and he's going to have to take a stand on it. And his leadership, as much as they want to signal right now that it's not under review and everyone in the Conservative Party backs him, those fractures are going to get bigger and bigger, especially if it continues to look in polling like he's not gaining ground. We'll see what happens. He's going to win this by-election, and then he'll be in the legislature, and we'll see. I think that's when the picture will really try to take shape. But as these conversations start picking up in Alberta, I think it's going to be dangerous ground for him to walk on to, politically speaking.
Absolutely. And let's remember that about this time after the election in 2019, Conservatives were all still saying that Andrew Scheer's leadership was safe. At about this time in the aftermath of 2021, Conservatives were all saying that Aaron O'Toole's leadership was safe.
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives' bloodletting is not an instantaneous thing the way that it is with other parties.
Yeah.
They like to stick the knife in and twist a little bit first.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that Polyev needs to be aware of too. I will say this: if Polyev's vote total in this by-election is significantly less, I'm not talking a couple of percentage, it's a by-election, weird things happen. I'm talking if Polyev wins this by-election with less than 65% of the vote, because let's remember this is the safest seat in the Conservatives in the country. I think if he wins this by-election with less than 65% of the vote, then there will be a quick ramp up.
That would be an 18-point swing, because they got 83% in this last election.
I'm not saying I think it's likely to happen. Yeah. I'm just saying I think if that does happen, if there is either a non-traditional party candidate who's able to really make waves, or if either the Liberals or NDP outperform expectations, then I think that then you'll start to see, when the House comes back in September, October, you'll see questions being asked. You'll see things start to happen very, very quickly. That is a signal that there is something going on here.
The 2021 redistributed results that make up the current Battle River Crowfoot riding, the People's Party got 9.3%. So we'll see what happens with a, fourth party. I don't know what to call it. You can't really call it a third party candidate, but whatever, outside, right wing.
I will also note the longest ballot initiative, which which targeted Carleton, the riding that Pierre Poilievre lost, has also announced that they will be targeting this by-election as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be another case where there will be dozens of names on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you want to talk about some good news that happened this past week?
Do I ever?
So Zohran Mamdani has, which I was not expecting at all, on the first. So keep in mind, it was ranked ballot. On the first ballot, came in 7% ahead of Andrew Cuomo. The last poll going into the election that actually had Mamdani leading and to win by 4 points had him losing the first ballot by about 5 or 6 percentage points. So he outperformed
It's over.
the optimistic poll by 10%. Yeah, Brad Lander had 12.
It's
Cuomo has
over.
conceded. It's done. I was all ready to think about it for the week, do the math, see what percent of the votes he might need to get him over the finish line. But within the night,
I'd
within
made
a
a
couple
graphic.
hours, an absolute rout, way above what anyone expected. So bad it's looking like Cuomo has now said he's not even going to run in the general. He's that embarrassed. Just a complete shellacking from a relatively unknown candidate against a huge name candidate, a candidate with mass name recognition, which usually means something in municipal elections, but I guess his brand was too sour and Zohran's was too good. What do you have to say that has led to this result in New York?
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City, and that is a beautiful statement. Yeah, I mean, it's Zohran ran one of the best campaigns I have ever seen for any office anywhere.
Out of the
And
AOC playbook, I think the best since AOC.
Definitely. Maybe even better. And like AOC ran an incredibly impressive campaign in 2018.
And it could also be more local because it was a smaller area. Like she was just targeting the one congressional district, not all of New York City, which
absolutely. But yeah, Zohran Mamdani showed everyone how to run an election campaign. He is a once in a generation political talent. He genuinely believes in affordability, and that has been his key message. His ability, I've been watching interviews with him for weeks at this point, and his ability to take any single question and turn it into a question about affordability. It didn't matter if the question was about affordability or if the question was about his experience or if the question was about Israel or if the question was about, he could take any subject matter. And by the end of his answer, he was talking about making New York City a more affordable place to live. Go ahead.
And he was doing it in an authentic, natural way that made it seem like it was actually him talking from things that he cared about and not like I'm getting this in because it's a part of my stump speech, which if you follow campaigns closely, you will follow candidates' talking points and they will say the exact same wording for the exact same points over and over again. And no matter what, piece of media, what hit they're doing, and they're trying to get that tie back, and Jagmeet tried and failed at it, to healthcare, and it's not relating. I think one of the problems, if I can relate this to the back to Canada, if that's the lens we want to take it on, is with the left on Canada, they're too focused on one, they're scared. They're scared of saying the wrong thing. They're scared of taking any stance that's on any particular issue. And they're too measured with their messaging, and they edit too much. They don't allow natural natural personality and natural opinions to resonate and run on things without being scared. You can run on saying we're going to freeze the rent, you can run on saying and doing it in a way that isn't just like in Ontario. The NDP is the only party that, supports real rent control now. the Liberals support a phase plan. Shut up, too much. Just say we're going
Just talk.
to freeze your rent and we're gonna do it in an affordable way. These people took away rent control because they don't want you to be able to afford housing. We are going to do this. Like, it can be black and white. And Marit Stiles tweeted, I should reiterate, her team tweeted, because it was so evidently not her voice. Congratulations at Zohran Mamdani. What you've built goes far beyond New York City. You've captured the imagination of progressives everywhere. Progressives. What does that word mean? Everywhere, with a blueprint for how we can win, with hope, with values, and with the belief that politics can be a force for good. We're watching and we're inspired. That sounds like the classic communications director for the NDP. Just like these like templated like progressives, hope, values. Bullshit. Say the things you ran and won on.
You know what would have been,
and we agree with you. We want to do this to make life more affordable in Ontario. Sorry, that's my little rant.
No, I 100% agree. If I were in charge of the Ontario NDP's messaging, which at one time in my life was my career goal, but if that was what I was doing, the tweet would have been, as Zohran Mamdani says, freeze the rent, make buses fast and free, and free childcare. We agree. We'll do it too.
Yes, exactly.
That's it. Full stop. That's all you needed to say. Or you could have just said, you didn't even need to say all that. You could have just said, freeze the rent, make buses fast and free childcare.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Those were his core. You didn't need to call him out specifically.
Things.
Yeah.
Yes.
All you needed to do was just tweet that out, and progressives who were paying attention to the New York mayoral election would have immediately known what you were talking about.
And you don't have to, you don't want to siphon yourself off to say, we're just the party for progressives. That's not how Zohran Mamdani won. Zohran Mamdani won by making a big tent that included people who historically don't vote, people who historically might not even consider themselves or call themselves progressives, and people from all over the city in a diverse range of demographics. So no one is looking at that tweet and saying, progressive values and hope, I support that. What the fuck does that mean? People are looking at tweets and saying, oh, these things that are going to make my life more affordable, I support that. That is what you have to take.
I have occasion right now to be paying attention for several different reasons to successful, particularly municipal campaigns. And to think about campaign strategy. And I think that it's a key point that doesn't get talked about enough, that labels mean shit, right? To people on the street, unless it is like a party identifier, labels very much
level in Canada you don't even have. Sorry.
And so unless it is a party identifier, labels don't mean anything. So call yourself whatever you want. And the angle that I very much think is the one to take is call yourself a moderate. Say, yeah, I'm a moderate. You know what are moderate positions? Freezing the rent, making life more affordable. You know what's a moderate position? Like, define people who are against affordability as radical. Make it clear that the people who are the ones who are actually talking about real solutions for real people on affordability issues are the moderate people, because those are the positions that are actually in the center of society. And that's what Zohran Mamdani very much did. He may not have used that exact languaging, but he talked about it as going, every New Yorker deserves an affordable life. He talked about specific jobs and specific New Yorkers who worked at night and people who did specific things and who walked the streets, and he just spoke to people in a way that was real. And yeah, he calls himself a democratic socialist because that's technically, ideologically, by textbook what he is. And he, identifies as a progressive, and he, whatever else, he used that kind of language as was helpful to speak to those specific pieces of the coalition. But overall, it's really just about putting yourself in the center of society and making it clear that people are your priority and that affordability is your priority and that just making life easier is what politics should be about. And if you can do that while having the same kind of viral sensationalism and charisma that Zohran Mamdani very evidently has, then I think that you very much are going to be able to pull something impressive off in the way that he has.
Yeah, and I hope that politicians on the left learn the right lessons from this win, and learn that, especially in municipal politics, you don't have to be scared. You can run and win with a bold vision, and you can be creative, and you don't have to try to appeal to the demographics of people that you think historically win you municipal elections, because people don't vote, or the people who turn out are homeowners, or the all these like tropes of like, we can't do that because that will upset this group of type of residents, and they learn that you can run and win a candidate with a platform that is transformative, and you can run on the platform, and that can be enough. And I hope people learn the right lessons from this. So
absolutely,
I'll leave it.
So Ontario municipal elections are in 2026. Watch this space.
Okay.
So let's move on to winners and losers.
We might have the same loser this week. Do you want me to start with my loser, or do
You start with your loser. I have a backup. I got him
my
last week.
loser is Cuomo. He actually lost this week. So we've seen it time and time again. These politicians who have higher office lose or embarrassed. We've seen it in Ontario, Del Duca, Horvath, Patrick Brown, have all resigned from their post at a provincial level in disgrace in some form, and ran municipally, and they all feel like they're entitled to their little local municipal seat, and they all won. Cuomo had huge money behind him, huge super PACs, huge name recognition. The entire billionaire class in New York, which is humongous, was all backing him. He was their chance, and he blew it, and he's a loser. There's my loser.
Perfect. I love it. He is the loser. Okay. My loser for the week is every other mayoral candidate who endorsed Andrew Cuomo over Zohran Mamdani as to be higher on their ballot. I don't have the full list in front of me, but there were a number of them. They are all losers. They didn't understand fundamentally what was happening in this race. They didn't understand fundamentally what Zohran Mamdani was campaigning on. And it will damage their political careers. The mayor of New York City is maybe the single-handedly most powerful political position in the United States outside of the president. they are, I'm not talking in terms of like raw power necessarily, but I'm talking in terms of like being able to on a daily basis
Executive
influence
power, impact lives. Yeah.
And just in term and also absolutely and impact the narrative that is out there, right? The financial sector is headquartered in New York. The media sector is very much headquartered in New York for the most part. It is, they really do have that kind of ability. So I think that is what I would say to that, because I don't know that Zohran Mamdani is a particularly vindictive person, but I also don't know that he's going to be doing any favors for any of them in their careers.
And those favors is why they did those endorsements, is because they thought.
Well, exactly. So my losers are all of those people who didn't. I want to specifically call out though Brad Lander. Once again, we've talked about him in the past, not as a loser, but as a maybe runner-up winner, because he really did, by telling his supporters to rank Zohran as number 2, he really kind of secured this for him. So hats off to Brad Lander.
It didn't end up mattering as much as it might, but it still will matter. It is what will win. It is what will get Zohran over the 50%. Yeah.
All right, Isaac, who's your winner for the week?
I'll give it to Naheed Nenshi. He didn't lose. Well, he was never going to lose. He didn't have any results that would have put question marks on his leadership. He now has a seat as a legislator. He's setting himself up okay. He won in Edmonton. He's now got his seat in Edmonton. He's got his connections to Calgary from being mayor there for a decade. So, he is set up to hopefully secure those urban centers, and now he can get to work on spreading out the support to take down Danielle Smith, which I think would be huge if they were able to do it. So that's
massive political earthquake that would cause. I have a question actually about Naheed Nenshi that I forgot to ask when we were talking about Alberta. Do you think he stays in Strathcona in the next election, or do you think he goes back to Calgary?
I think he stays in Strathcona. I think it would kind of be seen as, it's one thing to go run in a by-election in a riding is not your home riding, to secure that as a leader, that seat, and it happens very often. I think it comes across as pretty transparent to then go back,
a little John Tory-esque.
Yeah. Like Jagmeet Singh didn't do it. I don't suspect he will do it. I don't really see the upside in doing it. And
no, I mean, the only upside is that you get his name in Calgary in the next general.
Yeah. I think his name is already, with leaders on, with how leadership works in Canada, his name people will associate the Alberta NDP with Nenshi, and that will be strong enough, I think, with or without him running for the seat there. And this way he's then also in Edmonton too. So that's my take.
That makes sense. I agree with you. I was just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
All right. My winner for the week, I had 2 in case you took my one, but you very kindly did not.
I left it.
So my winner for this week is Zohran Mamdani. I believe this might bring him up to tied or close to tied with Carney for top number.
I think he's at 3. I think Carney had like 4
or 5. Yeah. Carney went on a real run. Okay,
but
yeah.
The fact that he's probably in second now, if we look back at our leaderboard, most winners is pretty crazy.
Nenshi's at 2 because I picked Nenshi at one point. But I think that those are the only multiples. Okay, Zohran Mamdani, the future mayor of New York City. I mean, he's the future mayor of New York City. Like he's won the primary. He won it so brutally that Andrew Cuomo now isn't going to run in the general.
And he's getting
Which
all
was
the endorsements.
He's getting all the endorsements. Letitia James showed up at his victory party and introduced him, which was massive because she was one of the real holdouts. She had not even told people to put him on their ballot. And so the fact that she showed up there and introduced him in that way and told everyone to get behind him was really what triggered that need to endorse him.
There's been more of a coalition of establishment Democrats than I expected. Like Jerry Nadler, the congressman from Manhattan, endorsed him yesterday. Who has strong roots actually with the New York Jewish community, and like, so it's a big signal that there will be this coalition around him that I thought might not happen. So
no, I thought that there would be people who would hold their nose and maybe go with Adams. But the fact that isn't happening is a really, really good sign. So yeah, we've talked about him quite a bit this episode. I don't have a huge amount more to say, except I'm very excited. I stayed up until after 1 a.m. watching his victory party on Tuesday night. This feels like a real win. It feels like a real win for the left of the Democratic Party. It will bolster them as well. It will bolster AOC. It will bolster Bernie Sanders. It will bolster that movement. I think it is a huge signal as to what might happen in 2028 with the party base. Speaking of which, we have our 2028 Democratic draft coming up, which I think maybe we'll do next week. I thought maybe we're going to be together in person next week, Isaac. And I thought maybe we'd sneak away for 40 minutes at some point.
I don't know if we'll be able to rely on the internet signal. I don't know if I trust
That's
it.
fair.
So I think maybe we
That's
just
fair.
do it and then we'll debrief in person off when we can record, because I don't know how likely we'll be able to record.
That's a fair concern. We'll figure it out. But anyway, that should be coming out next week, one way or the other. And so yeah, let us know who your top contenders are. We wanted to do it this early so that people haven't started ruling themselves out yet. We want to have as broad a base of people to pull from as possible to make it a little bit more interesting. And then if you get it
right, you get bigger bragging rights, and the takes look more ridiculous when you look back on them. If you look at any primary like draft from 3 years before the primary, I'm sure every single cycle you will see names where you're like, that is ridiculous. So
that's wild. Yeah, no, I'm sure it'll happen to us. I figure what we'll do is we'll do another version of it once it actually gets going in a couple of years. But for right now, this will be fun. So thanks for joining us. Please like, comment, subscribe. We see the views going up. It's appreciated. Yeah. Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah.